Tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court seems torn over the issue of same-sex marriage. The questions from the justices seem to indicate that they were divided along ideological lines, conservative and liberal. 24-hour News 8's Brian Sterling had a rare ticket to be inside the courtroom for those arguments in Washington, D.C. He joins us live tonight. Brian?
Yeah, good afternoon again, Sue. You know, court observers here say that you need to watch Justice Anthony Kennedy and Chief Justice John Roberts to try to get a read on where the court might go with this, how they'll decide. They hold the controlling votes. The justices, though, all of them, save for Clarence Thomas, engaged in a very robust exchange with all of the attorneys in court today. It gives you a good idea of how they're looking at history and how they try to interpret the Constitution. Here's what they said today.
Sorry, nobody's taking that away from anybody. Every single individual in this society chooses, if they can, their sexual orientation or who to marry or not marry. I suspect even with us giving gays rights to marry, that there are some gay people who will choose not to, just as there's some heterosexual couples who choose not to marry. So we're not taking anybody's liberty away.
Justice Kennedy, to be perfectly clear, the state of Michigan values the dignity and worth of every human being, no matter their orientation or how they choose to live their life. That's not what this case is about. Our point is that when you change something as fundamental as the marriage definition, as Chief Justice Roberts was saying, the dictionary definition which has existed for millennia, and you apply that over generations, that those changes matter.
That's a pretty good example of what happened in the courtroom today. Outside of the court, there's been a pretty zealous group of demonstrators that have been out here all weekend long, in fact, not just this week. And we had wondered if something was going to happen inside the courtroom today. There was an anticipation, would there be an outburst? There have been in the past in recent oral arguments before the High Court. About 30 minutes into today's proceedings, there was an outburst, and this is what it sounded like in the court. After that outburst, Justice Antonin Scalia broke the tension by saying that that was refreshing. But you could hear the protester for a good 8 to 10 minutes outside of the courtroom, at one point banging on the doors of the court until they finally had him removed. Of course, a lot happening here today at the High Court. We want to bring in our legal analyst to get a little bit more on his take of what happened today. Cooley Law School Professor Curt Benson is live back in our studios in Grand Rapids. Curt, thanks for joining us tonight. I guess, what was your takeaway? What were you watching out of the hearings today?
Well, what they were arguing is pretty consistent with what we've been hearing about all along. One argument says, look, marriage has been between a man and a woman in every society, literally since the dawn of time. And the idea of same-sex couple getting married is a very brand new thing. On the other side, they're saying, well, just because it's an old institution doesn't mean it can't change, and that equal protection being what it is, people should be allowed to marry regardless of their sexual orientation. So the arguments have been the same argument, frankly, we've been hearing now for 6-7 years.
Curt, the justices, at least a few of them, were quite reluctant to want to tamper with the Constitution when it came to marriage. That was the one issue. The second issue about this recognition, though, played out quite differently, where it almost seemed that the justices were indicating that you had to recognize marriages that were performed legally in other states. Is that the way you saw it?
I did, Brian. I think that, and that stands to reason, going back to when, ending the Articles of Confederation and creating the Constitution, it was designed in part to create a stronger, not all powerful, but a stronger national government. And one of the ways they did that is by requiring all states to recognize and honor and give full faith and credit to the decrees and orders of other states. And so I would not be surprised that even if they surprise everybody and announce that laws banning same-sex marriage does not violate the Constitution, I would not be surprised if they say, however, a couple married in Maryland, for example, as the case before them, a couple married in Maryland, Ohio must recognize that marriage, even if Ohio bans same-sex marriages.
Isn't that the key, too, Curt? Quickly, coming up in June, it's how this decision will be written.
It is. Although we're to the point now where there's not going to be a lot of, it's going to be all or nothing with respect to the DeBoer case, the case that Michigan is here. It's either going to be constitutional or unconstitutional. I don't see a lot of wiggle room here for the court. Kennedy, assuming that he writes the opinion, is renowned for writing very muddled and difficult to read opinions, quite frankly. But even he's going to have to express himself clearly and say, look, Michigan's Constitution violates the federal Constitution. This is therefore unconstitutional. Same-sex marriage is henceforth allowed in Michigan. Or he's going to say no. So it might be a long opinion, might be a short opinion, but there's only going to be one sentence that matters, and that's going to be the last sentence of the opinion.
Curt Benson, always appreciate your legal analysis with Cooley Law. Thanks for your time tonight, Curt. And our coverage here at the Supreme Court is just getting started this evening. Coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, we'll have a lot more from the parties involved in these cases that were before the High Court today. You'll hear from them in depth. That's my report at 6. Until then, Brian Sterling reporting live from Washington, D.C. Sue, back to you.
Okay, Brian, thanks. We'll look forward to that report at 6.